Last June, Fujifilm launched the new Fujifilm X-T50. Recently, I've had the opportunity to use this camera for about a month, photographing in the Dolomites, giving me plenty of time to test it out properly in real world. This is not a sponsored video, and I want to thank my friends at the DoM Photo Store who kindly lent me the camera for this review. Hi everyone, what's going on? I'm Andrea and I'm a professional travel landscape photographer, and today I want to share with you my impressions on the Fujifilm X-T50. This won't be a typical review. Instead, I will focus on usability and performance from a landscape photographer's perspective, and I will discuss what I like, what I don't like, and what I think the X-T50 is really for. If you're new to the channel, just to give you some context, I've been using Fujifilm cameras for over 10 years, and my favorites are still the X-T one-digit series, like the X-T2, 3, 4, and the newest X-T5, mainly because of their pro features and larger body that suits my big hands better. However, if you have been following my work for a while, you know I also use the smaller X-T30 as a lightweight backup camera, and I still think it's fantastic. If you are familiar with Fujifilm cameras, the X-T 2-digit models are known for being the more compact and affordable version of the higher-end X-T 1-digit series. However, with the new X-T50, affordability seems to be less of a priority. The new Fujifilm X-T50 brings a lot of new updates and is priced significantly higher than previous models in the line. It boasts the same 40-megapixel sensor we find on the X-T50, the same 5th generation processor, same 7-stops IBIS, which is really great addition to the line, nearly the same video specs and the same photo and video AF and shooting performance. So internally it's basically an X-T5 repacked in a smaller body. When it comes to the exterior features, it is where, of course, the X-T50 looks completely different from the X-T5. It has a similar ergonomic design to the X-T30, but it's slightly larger with more rounded edges, and what immediately stands out is the redesigned button and dial layout, which is one of the areas where I have some mixed feelings about certain changes. Okay, let's first start with how it was my experience in the field with the camera. As someone who has been using the X-T30 for about 5 years, the X-T50 felt instantly familiar. I love its compact size, it's incredibly easy to carry around. The ergonomics are pretty good. It's a bit small for my hands, but still enjoyable to use, especially with the new, more rounded edges. I set the front dial to ISO and the back dial to shutter speed, just like all my other Fujifilm bodies. I will be shooting manual modes, and to be honest, I rarely use the top dials for exposure compensation or shutter speed anymore, only on rare occasions. The positioning and accessibility of both dials are excellent, making them easy to adjust even while wearing gloves. Whether I was shooting handheld or on a tripod, the camera was a real pleasure to use. The 7-stop IBIS is fantastic. I love it. It makes a huge difference when shooting handheld, especially with long lenses or in low light conditions when I don't have time to set up a tripod. I don't get a single blurry shot the entire trip, which gave me great confidence in my gear. I can say the same thing though when comparing its performance on video, which from my experience is less effective. The IBIS isn't intended to be used with camera movements, I know, but sometimes even standing perfectly still doing slow pan tilt movements is very jerky. Anyway, for simple B-rolls I usually film for my YouTube videos, it's fine, but there is room for improvement. Alright, jumping right into image quality. Since it shares the same sensor of the X-T5, I can only say that the image quality of this tiny camera is absolutely fantastic. I've already covered it extensively in my X-T5 video review. The detailed contrast, color rendition, and dynamic range of the 40-megapixel sensor are excellent, giving me plenty of flexibility when editing. The sharpness is really great, and the higher megapixel counts allows for more forgiving cropping during post-processing. 70% of the images I captured during my trip to the Dolomites were with the X-T50 and the 50-140 lens. You know how much I love that lens, and I really enjoy the combo X-T50 with the 50-140. The weight of the lens was perfectly balanced by the lighter camera body, making the overall setup super manageable.
Oh yes, amazing.
A quick note about film simulations from a photo editing perspective. Most of these images have been edited starting with the new Reala Ace, which I must say works very effectively with slightly flat images. I find the Reala Ace gives that oomph right away, preserving natural color relationships while enhancing micro contrast before I even touch the sliders in the basic panel. I typically gravitate towards the Fujifilm simulation for most of my images, but the Reala Ace has now become my first first choice when I need to give images a bit more contrast right from the start. Now, speaking of film simulations, one of the new upgrades is the addition of a dedicated film simulation dial. Oh boy, this is where things get weird. I didn't use it once during the time I spent with the camera, and honestly, I don't understand it at all. I would have definitely preferred an updated driver video selection knob similar to the one of the XT30, maybe with a feature to save a separate photo and video settings. When the first reviews were coming out on this update, everyone was so excited about it, and I was like, seriously? So I can't really see myself frequently changing the film simulation throughout a photo session to the point where I would need a dedicated knob on top of the camera. For my travel or landscape work, I always set my camera to RAW. I use a customized profile to get a pretty flat output as a reference for evaluating the exposure on the display and EF, and that's it. I found that to be the best approach for maintaining consistency in my images and having full control of the data collected. So honestly, I don't care too much about the film simulation dial. As I said, I would probably prefer a drive video dials instead. Of course, we are not all the same, so I'm sure there are photographers out there who appreciate this new addition and find it useful. But that's not the case for me. Now, if you're getting value from this video, please like, share and subscribe to my channel. If you love traveling and want to take your photography and editing skills to a deeper, more personalized level, check out the link in the description below. You will find all the details on how to join me for one of my photography workshops next year in incredible locations like Iceland, the Dolomites, Namibia. So I'd love to have you join us. Talking about knobs and positioning from an overall perspective, when I look at them, they are getting even more different across each camera. I don't really understand Fujifilm's direction when it comes to knobs and buttons placements and ergonomics. To some extent, it feels like using cameras from different systems and brands. I just don't see any continuity or consistency across the entire lineup. Fujifilm introduced a new drive button, which is cool and replicates the approach used on the beautiful X100 series. However, I find that the drive button slows down my workflow when I need to switch between the single shot, burst, bracketing or video modes. I find it makes much more sense on the XT100 series, considering its different use. I can surely assign those functions to one of the custom buttons, but having them right there on a dedicated knob would be much more convenient. The Q button, which protrudes on the back, it's still in a not very practical position. Its location remains one of the most frustrating features of the entire camera. I've already mentioned my frustration with it in my past review on the XT30. It's almost impossible to not unintentionally press it and activate the quick menu. Anyway, just like on my XT30, I immediately deactivated it and assigned it to the EF on button. Like past models in this series, the XT50 has a tilt-only display with a higher resolution at 1840K dots, like the XT50. The up and down only touchscreen isn't a big deal to me based on how I use my cameras, but considering the camera's price point and its improved video capabilities, it's a bit of a bummer. It would be great to have a tilted screen that works also in portrait mode. The electronic viewfinder features the same 2.36 million dots as the XT30, which is nice. Didn't have any problem photographing with it, but of course it's not as amazing as the 3.69 million dots on the XT5. Here is one of those areas where I think Fujifilm scaled back features to fit the price range. That said, I don't see the lower resolution being a major downside or a limiting factor where it comes to the shooting experience or capturing great images. The autofocus is definitely snappier and more accurate than in the XT30, which is great, but it doesn't make much of a difference for my landscape photography. However, it's a nice plus when doing travel photography, when I need more responsiveness and work quicker. As for video, even with this new release, the AF is still not great and not very reliable, with the same flaws we see in the XT5. The AF performance isn't quite up to Sony and Canon's standards. I had the opportunity multiple times to compare the AF on videos with the other Sony and Canon users, and the difference is in how much faster and more reliably the AF locks onto the subjects on those cameras is substantial. For normal, easy shooting scenario, it's fine, but man, I still don't know what's holding Fujifilm back from catching up. Now, if you are just looking at the price of the X-T50, there are other few drawbacks that make me hesitate to consider this camera a good deal, at least for myself. First off, the camera is not weather sealed. I talked about this aspect in others of my videos, and I've said before that the lack of weather sealing has never been a big problem with my X-T30. I've taken it through all sorts of challenging weather, and with a little extra care, it handled everything just fine. But with the X-T50 being priced at a premium, I do think that this is one feature that would have made a real difference. Another thing is that it uses the same older, smaller NP-W125S style battery. Fujifilm says that the new processor is more efficient, and this battery will continue to last like it would with the bigger and newer battery. But from my experience, with the integration of the new IBIS, I found myself switching batteries more often than with my X-T30. My X-T4's new version batteries can easily last me a whole day of shooting stills and video with juice to spare for the next day. Of course, you can always bring spare batteries, but it's kind of a hassle to swap them out when you are dealing with freaking weather and your camera is dying. This is an aspect that I'm valuing more and more with each year. The third thing is the single SD card slot. I know the X-T30 has one, two, but what really bugs me is that for just $200 more, you get an X-T5 with all the features that are missing here. These are features that I find very important for anyone who decides to invest that amount of money in a camera that lacks premium features but comes with a premium price tag. And finally, there is no dedicated photo or video switch on this camera. You have to go into the drive mode and scroll all the way to the bottom to switch the video mode, and that's kind of weird for a hybrid camera, especially since Fujifilm has included that photo video toggle on all the other models. So that's another reason that makes me wonder who this camera is really for. Don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed taking and using the X-T50 to Dolomites, and I'm super happy with the images I got. It's really great having a compact camera body as a backup, especially with that level of image quality. That being said, I keep asking myself, what's the decisive factor that would make someone choose the X-T50 over the X-T5? I don't think the film simulation knob is a deciding factor that would attract a whole new audience. At this price point, the only compelling reason I see to get the X-T50 over the X-T5 is if compactness is your top priority, which means saving 119 grams in weight and size, not a lot honestly, but even then, if you are after a more compact, still powerful camera at a price that's more aligned with what you get, I would say the X-T30 is a more viable option. Beyond that, from my personal perspective, it's hard for me to recommend the X-T50 over the X-T5. If it were a couple of $100 cheaper, it would feel like a better deal. For just a couple $100 more, you can get all the pro levels features of the incredible X-T5, which is totally worth the investment. Or even pick up a second-hand X-T5 for the same price. I remember when Fuji launched the first X-T 2-digit series, and it was meant to be the smaller, more affordable version of the flagship X-T 1-digit series. Well, now I really struggle to see that difference. Alright, that's my take on the Fujifilm X-T50. What about you? What's your opinion on this Fuji release? If you are a Fujifilm user or an X-T50 owner, please leave a comment and share your thoughts or experience with the camera. I'd love to hear what you think. And if you are interested in joining me on a photo trip, feel free to check out my workshops page. The link is in the description down below. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I see you in the next video. Ciao!